You better walk away, girl. This ain't your fight. She heard it. She felt it in her chest, that cold, hollow warning that every person feels right before they make a choice they can never take back. Emily Carter was 24 years old, covered in motor oil, standing under a broken gas station light at 11 o'clock at night. And she walked forward anyway. 10 seconds. That was all it took to change everything. If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel, hit the bell, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The first thing you need to understand about Emily Carter is that she had learned very early in her life that the world was not designed to make things easy for women like her. Not in Harlan County, not in a profession built on grease and iron, and the unspoken assumption that the only hands worth trusting under the hood of a machine were hands that belonged to men. She had known that truth since she was 9 years old, standing on a step stool beside her father in the garage, her small fingers holding a flashlight steady, while he explained in the patient, careful way that only a father can, exactly why an engine makes that particular knocking sound when the timing belt has slipped 3 teeth to the left. "You listening, Em?" he would say without looking up, because he always knew when her mind was drifting. "I'm listening, Dad." "Then tell me what I just said." And she would repeat it back word for word because she had been listening. She was always listening. That was the one thing nobody in Harlan County ever gave Emily Carter credit for: how deeply, how completely, how almost painfully she paid attention to everything around her. Her name was Emily Rose Carter. Born and raised in a town so small that the gas station, the diner, and the bank all shared the same parking lot. She had blonde hair that she kept pulled back in a tight braid when she was working, which was most of the time. She had her mother's eyes gray-green, the color of the sky, right before a thunderstorm decides which direction it's going, and she had her father's hands wide-palmed and strong, permanently stained along the knuckle lines with grease that no amount of orange hand soap could fully remove. She drove a 2003 Ford F-150 that she had rebuilt from a shell. She wore steel-toed boots every single day. She owned 3 pairs of clean jeans and 1 dress that she kept on a hanger behind the bathroom door for occasions she rarely attended. She was by every measurable standard a woman who had chosen her life with both eyes open, and she had loved it once. The garage had been her father's before it was hers. Thomas Carter, everyone in town called him Tommy, had opened Carter's Repair off the main highway 22 years ago with a used hydraulic lift, a second-hand toolbox, and a stubbornness that bordered on the religious. He had built that garage with his own hands, expanded it 3 times, added the small office in the back where he kept his ledgers and his coffee maker, and the framed photograph of Emily's mother taken the summer before she got sick. Tommy Carter had died 14 months ago. He had not died in a dramatic way. He had not died in a way that made the local paper or brought flowers to the door for more than a week. He had died the way a lot of working men die quietly, from something that had been building inside him for years, without announcing itself, a heart that had simply worked too hard for too long, and one morning decided it was finished. Emily had been in the garage when it happened. She had been lying on her back under a '98 Chevy Silverado 3/4 of the way through, replacing a cracked exhaust manifold when she heard the sound from the office. Not a crash, not a shout, just a chair moving, a cup hitting the floor. Something in that sound made her slide out from under the truck so fast she scraped both elbows on the concrete. She found him slumped in his chair, his hand still resting on the open ledger, his reading glasses slightly crooked on his face, his eyes closed in the patient, familiar way she had seen him sleep 1,000 times. But he was not sleeping. She had called 911. She had done CPR for 11 minutes before the paramedics arrived. She had ridden in the ambulance holding his hand and talking to him, telling him stories about the engines. She was going to rebuild the customers who were coming in next week. The new timing light she had ordered that was going to make diagnostic work so much faster, talking, just talking, because she did not know what else to do. He was pronounced dead at 4:47 in the afternoon. Emily drove herself home from the hospital. She sat in the parking lot of the garage for 40 minutes before she could make her legs work well enough to go inside. Then she went inside, finished replacing the exhaust manifold on the Silverado, called the customer, and told him his truck was ready. She did not cry until she was in the shower that night, alone with the water running hot enough to turn her skin red. That was Emily Carter. That was how she was built. The problem, the real, practical, suffocating problem, was that a garage needs money to stay alive, in the same way a body needs oxygen, and Tommy Carter had, despite his enormous talent and his legendary reputation in 4 counties, died with the kind of debt that a 24-year-old woman with no business degree and no collateral and no family with connections does not survive easily. He had taken out a second mortgage on the property 3 years before he died, trying to expand the shop and buy 2 new lifts. The expansion had worked, business had been good, the lifts had paid for themselves within 18 months, but the loan was still there, patient and indifferent and growing. There was also the equipment loan, the insurance premium that had lapsed, the account with the parts supplier that had slipped 60 days past due, because Tommy had always meant to catch up on it, the same way he had always meant to call his brother in Phoenix, and always meant to get his blood pressure checked, and always meant to do 100 things he never got around to. Emily inherited the garage and the debt at the same time the way most people inherit things, without warning, without preparation, and without any clear idea of whether she was strong enough to carry it. She decided she was. She was wrong to be so confident, but she was also right to try. For 14 months, Emily Carter ran Carter's Repair alone. She opened at 7 and closed whenever the last job was done, which was usually 9 or 10 at night. She did oil changes, brake jobs, transmission repairs, electrical diagnostics, engine rebuilds. She fixed motorcycles and farm equipment, and once memorably spent 4 hours repairing the hydraulic system on a vintage hay baler for a farmer named Dale, who had driven it 40 miles on a flatbed because someone had told him Emily Carter could fix anything. She could fix almost anything. What she could not fix was a bank that had decided based on factors she could not fully see, but could absolutely feel that a 24-year-old woman running a small-town garage was not a sound investment. She had applied to 3 banks in 14 months. 3 times she had put on the only blazer she owned, gathered her papers, her business records, her revenue projections, her documentation of every repair she had completed since taking over, and driven to an office with fluorescent lights and carpet, the color of old mustard, and sat across from a man in a pressed shirt who looked at her documents and looked at her face and made a decision that he probably thought was purely financial, but that Emily knew in the marrow of her bones was about something else entirely. The first bank had told her her debt-to-income ratio was too high. The second bank had told her she lacked sufficient collateral. The third bank, and this was the one that nearly broke something inside her, the third bank loan officer had leaned back in his chair and said with a smile that he probably thought was kind, "Miss Carter, have you considered that perhaps the garage business isn't the right path for someone in your situation?" Someone in your situation. She had driven home from that meeting in complete silence. She had parked the truck. She had gone into the garage. She had picked up a wrench, a 3/4-inch combination wrench, the kind that fits comfortably in the palm of your hand, and she had gripped it so hard her fingers went white. Then she had walked over to a 2007 Yamaha R6 that a college kid had brought in with a misfire on cylinder 3, and she had diagnosed it, fixed it, and written up the invoice in 45 minutes. Because that was the only thing she knew to do with the feeling. Work, always work. The night of October 14th, a Thursday cold and clear, with a wind cutting down from the north that had an early winter in it, Emily left the garage at 10:45 p.m. after finishing a brake line replacement on a delivery van. She was tired in the specific way that only comes from using your whole body for 14 hours straight. Her lower back ached. Her right shoulder, which she had injured slightly the previous spring when a floor jack had slipped, was speaking to her in a low, steady complaint. She needed gas. The truck was running on fumes, and the nearest open station was the Sunoco out on Route 9, the one that everybody in town knew was a little rough at night, but that stayed open until midnight because the Pakistani family who owned it lived in the apartment above it, and the father, Mr. Hussein, a quiet man with careful eyes, had always said that closing early was the same as telling people you didn't trust them. Emily liked that about him. She pulled in at 10:52 p.m. The station was mostly empty. A white sedan was parked by the air pump, nobody in it. The lights inside the store were on. One of the 2 overhead canopy lights was flickering, which gave the whole space an irregular, uncertain quality. And at the far pump, near the edge of the lot where the pavement cracked and the shadows started, there was a motorcycle. A beautiful one, even at a distance, even tired as she was, Emily could see it was something remarkable. A vintage Harley-Davidson, a shovelhead late 70s, the kind of bike that serious collectors spent years hunting down. It was immaculate. Someone had put a lifetime of care into that machine. Standing beside it was an old man. He was tall but thin, in the way that men get when age has burned away everything except structure. White hair under a leather vest. The vest had patches on it, but she could not read them from where she was standing. He moved slowly, carefully, like someone whose joints had opinions about the weather. He was filling his tank. He did not see what Emily saw. She saw them the moment she pulled in. 3 men, early 30s, coming around from the side of the building. Not in any hurry, moving with the particular loose-limbed confidence of people who had already decided how the next 5 minutes were going to go. The first one, heavy-set, wearing a canvas jacket with the collar up, reached the old man before he had finished pumping. "Hey, old man." The old man looked up. He did not look afraid. He looked, if anything, slightly irritated in the way that a person looks when they have been interrupted during a task they are trying to complete properly. "Evening," the old man said. "Nice bike." The heavy-set one stepped closer. "Shame about the owner." The old man put the pump nozzle back in the cradle, slowly, deliberately. He turned to face the man fully. "You got something to say," the old man said. "Say it clear." "I'm saying you don't belong here, old man, you and your little toy." The second one, shorter, nervous energy in his hands, was moving around the back of the motorcycle. "People like you don't just ride through wherever they want." "People like me," the old man repeated. Not a question, a measurement. "Yeah." The third one, tall, thin, with a chain on his belt that he was touching with one hand, stepped to the old man's left. "Exactly what I said." Emily had parked the truck. She was already out of it before she made any conscious decision to get out of it. She had the pump nozzle in her hand, her own pump at her own car, and she was watching. The heavy-set one shoved the old man, not hard enough to knock him down, hard enough to communicate something, hard enough to say, "We can do this as slow or as fast as you want, but it ends the same way." The old man stumbled back against the motorcycle. His hand caught the mirror, instinctive, automatic, the way a rider always knows where their bike is, and steadied himself. He did not reach back. He did not raise his voice. He looked at the 3 men with an expression that Emily would think about later, replaying it, trying to identify what it was. It was not fear. It was not anger exactly. It was something older than anger, something that had been anger once a long time ago and had since become something quieter and more permanent. Resignation, maybe. Or patience. The patience of a man who has seen this before and knows exactly how it ends and is in some tired, private way already past caring about what comes next. And that right there was the thing that moved Emily. Not the shoving, not the menace, not the 3-to-1 odds. It was the look in the old man's eyes. Because she had seen that look before. She had seen it in her father's face the day the first bank turned him down for an equipment loan, and he had driven home and sat in the garage for an hour, not saying anything, just sitting while Emily, 16 years old, doing homework at the workbench, pretended not to notice. That look, that particular kind of tired, she was not going to watch it happen again. "Hey," the word came out of her mouth before she had finished forming it. Not loud, not aggressive, just direct, the way you say it when you need someone to actually hear you. All 3 of them turned. They saw what she expected them to see. A young woman, blonde braid work boots, grease still under her fingernails, pump nozzle in her left hand, standing about 15 feet away. Not a threat, not to them anything worth adjusting their plans for. The heavy-set one actually smiled. "Mind your business, sweetheart." Emily took one step closer, then another. "I am minding my business," she said. "My business right now is that you 3 are messing with a man who's just trying to fill his tank." The short one laughed, a quick, dismissive sound. "You need to walk back to your truck, honey." "I need you 3 to walk away from his bike." Something shifted in the air, the way it does when a situation is deciding what it wants to become. The heavy-set one started to move toward her. Here is what happened in the next 10 seconds, measured precisely the way Emily Carter measured everything one. She registered his weight distribution forward, heavy right shoulder, leading the stance of someone who relies on size rather than training. 2. She stepped to her right out of his direct line. 3. He grabbed for her arm. She let him close his hand on empty air. 4. Using her left forearm, she redirected his momentum, not a strike. A redirect, the difference between fighting and using physics. When he stumbled, his knee hit the pavement. 6. The other 2 moved. She put herself between them and the old man, her back to the motorcycle, the pump nozzle still in her hand, though she would not need it and would not use it. 7. "I said walk away." 8. The short one pulled up. Something in her voice had changed. She was not scared. She had not been scared once in the preceding 8 seconds. And they could feel that the complete, steady, unflinching absence of fear in a way that was more unsettling than if she had been armed. 9. The tall one looked at the short one. Something passed between them. 10. They pulled the heavy-set one to his feet and walked away. Across the parking lot, around the building, gone. Emily stood with her back to the motorcycle for another full 5 seconds, watching the direction they had gone, making sure. Then she let out a breath. "You all right?" she said without turning around. There was a pause behind her, a long one. Then the old man said in a voice like gravel and old engine oil, "I've been all right since before your parents were born, young lady." She turned. He was looking at her with an expression she had never seen before. Or more accurately, she had never seen it directed at her. She had seen it on her father's face sometimes when a customer came in with a particularly complex problem, and Tommy Carter watched his daughter solve it in 15 minutes. It was a look that contained surprise and recognition in equal measure. The look of a person revising an opinion they did not know they held. "Those your tools on the ground?" she asked. She had not noticed it before, but a soft-sided tool roll, the kind serious mechanics carry, had been knocked to the pavement. It had come open, wrenches and sockets scattered across the concrete. The old man looked down at them. Something crossed his face. Not distress over the tools themselves. Something more personal than that. "Yeah," he said. Emily bent down and began picking them up. Not quickly, carefully. Taking a moment to look at each one because the tools a mechanic carries tell you things if you know how to read them. These were old, worn smooth at the handles, but maintained, cleaned and oiled, and taken care of the way you take care of things that matter to you. "Snap-on," she said, turning a ratchet in her hand. "Vintage, probably mid-'80s. The old man crouched down beside her, slowly with a slight catch in his breathing that suggested a hip that had been rebuilt at least once, and picked up a combination wrench. "'78, he said. "You've had these since '78. Longer than you've been alive. They're in beautiful shape." He looked at her. "You know tools." "I'm a mechanic." Another pause. Longer this time. "What kind?" "Motorcycle mostly, but I'll turn a wrench on anything that needs it." She rolled the tool roll back up and handed it to him. He took it, held it for a moment, then said something that caught her completely off guard. "What's your name?" "Emily Carter. I run the shop off Route 12. Carter's Repair." He nodded slowly, like he was filing it away. "Silas Crow," he said. He did not offer a hand to shake. He did not explain anything further. He just looked at her with those measuring eyes for a moment that stretched in a way she could not quite categorize. Then he said, "You moved like someone who's done that before." She thought about it. "I grew up taking care of things," she said finally. "You learn to move fast." Silas Crow nodded again, got to his feet, looked down at his Harley, checking it the way a rider always checks their machine after something unexpected running. One hand along the frame, crouching to look at the engine, standing up with his assessment complete. "She's all right," he said, "about the motorcycle, and possibly about something else." Emily went back to her truck, filled her tank, paid at the pump because Mr. Hussein's machine accepted cards and she was too tired for a conversation. She drove home, showered, sat at the kitchen table with a cup of bad coffee and her father's ledgers running numbers she already knew by heart. The garage was 3 months from serious trouble. Not closing, not yet, but the kind of trouble that starts a clock. She went to bed at 1:15 a.m. She did not think about Silas Crow again until Tuesday afternoon, when she was in the middle of diagnosing a fuel delivery issue on a customer's Indian Scout, and she heard a motorcycle turn off Route 12 into her parking lot. She heard it before she saw it. The particular sound of a Harley shovelhead is distinctive in the same way that a certain kind of silence is distinctive. It fills space in its own specific way, and once you know that sound, you cannot unknow it. She came out from under the Scout, wiping her hands on a shop rag, and stood at the bay door. Silas Crow parked the Harley. He killed the engine. He sat on the bike for a moment, though, way riders do, giving themselves a second before they return to the world of standing and walking, and then he climbed off and walked toward her. He was wearing the vest again. This time she could read the patches. She read them. She took a moment to process what she was reading. "You're Hell's Angels," she said. "Been that for 42 years. No apology in it, no performance, just a fact stated the way you state your name or your birthplace." "I don't have any trouble with that," she said. "No," he said. I didn't think you would. He looked at the garage, looked at the sign Carter's Repair. Her father's lettering faded now, but still perfectly legible. Looked at the bay doors, both open, the hydraulic lifts, the neatly organized toolboxes, the whiteboard on the wall where she kept her job schedule. He looked at all of it the way she had looked at his tools reading it, understanding something from it. You run this alone, he said. Me and a part-timer on Wednesdays, she said. Donnie, he's 16 and mostly sweeps up and hands me things. But yeah, mostly alone. Silas nodded. I'm going to tell you something, he said, and I need you to hear it straight because I don't say things I don't mean. He paused. What you did Thursday night, that took something, not just nerve, something else. The other three who were filling their tanks, 2 of them are grown men. Neither one of them moved. Emily said nothing. I'm not telling you that to make you feel good about yourself, he continued. I'm telling you because it matters to me to know the kind of person who did it. And I've had 42 years of learning how to read people. It's one of the few things I've gotten good at. He looked at her directly. You're the real thing, Emily Carter. She held his gaze. What does that mean exactly coming from you? Means I want to offer you something, and he said. There's a workshop. Belongs to some men I'm responsible for. Good mechanics, all of them, but we've got work coming in faster than we can turn it. I want to know if you'd be willing to come in. Part-time or full, your choice. Good pay, real work, and nobody's going to tell you to go make coffee. Emily looked at him for a long moment. Then she said the thing she had been trained her whole life not to say to strangers, the thing her practical nature and her experience, in 14 months of being let down by institutions, had made her almost incapable of saying. Yes. She said it because she was tired of saying no to things. She had been saying no, not with words, but with circumstances for 14 months. No, the bank won't help you. No, you can't expand. No, you can't hire anyone. No, you can't catch up. No, you can't rest. She was so exhausted from all the things that kept saying no to her that when someone said yes for a change, yes, you're good enough. Yes, I see what you are. Yes, I'm offering you something. The word came out of her before caution could catch it. Silas looked at her, that same measuring expression. Good, he said. Come by Saturday morning, 7 o'clock. He gave her an address, not a printed card, just the address spoken once the way men of his generation give information they expect you to retain. She repeated it back to him. He nodded. Bring your own tools, and bring a thick skin. The men in that shop have strong opinions. The corner of his mouth moved not quite a smile, but in the neighborhood of one. They're usually wrong, but they're loud about it. He walked back to the Harley, climbed on, started the engine, and then before he rode away, he said one more thing. He said it without looking at her, looking instead at the road, the way people sometimes say things they have been carrying for a while. Your father built a good shop, Emily Carter. She had not told him her father was dead. She had not told him anything about her father at all. How do you know about my father? She said. But the shovelhead was already pulling out onto Route 12 and whatever Silas Crow knew about Tommy Carter and Carter's Repair. He took it with him into the afternoon. Emily stood in the bay door for a long time after he was gone. Then she went back inside, went back under the Scout, found the fuel delivery issue, a cracked diaphragm in the vacuum petcock, simple fix 20 minutes and wrote up the invoice. She thought about Saturday. She thought about the kind of person who knows about your father without you telling him. She thought about 42 years of reading people and whether a man who had spent that much time learning to see clearly might be trustworthy precisely because of it. She thought about the 3 men in the parking lot and the way they had walked away from her, not because she had overpowered them, but because she had communicated something specific, something that even now she did not have a clean word for. A certainty, maybe. The certainty of someone who has run out of things to be afraid of. And she thought about her father's ledgers open on the kitchen table and the number at the bottom of the column and the 3 months. She thought about all of these things in the 45 minutes it took her to replace the vacuum petcock and reassemble the fuel system on the Indian Scout. Then the customer came to pick up the bike, and she smiled and showed him the cracked part and explained what it had been doing to his fuel delivery and charged him a fair price and watched him right away. She closed the shop at 9. She did not sleep easily that night, but she did not change her mind. Saturday was 4 days away. 4 days of oil changes and brake jobs in one very complicated electrical diagnostic on a fleet van that was going to take most of Wednesday. 4 days of running numbers and ignoring the number that kept rising at the bottom of the column. 4 days of being Emily Carter alone in the garage her father built, turning wrenches and holding things together with skill and stubbornness, and the particular kind of faith that is less about believing everything will be fine and more about refusing to act as if it won't. 4 days. And then she was going to drive to an address she had only heard once and walk into a room full of men she did not know and find out whether the most important snap decision she had made since the night her father's coffee cup hit the floor was the smartest thing she had ever done, or the most dangerous. She was not sure in those 4 days that there was a difference. What she was sure of, and this was the thing, the bedrock thing, the thing she came back to every time the doubt tried to get loud, was that Silas Crowe had looked at her tools the same way she had looked at his, with recognition, with respect. And in Emily Carter's world, a man who respects another mechanic's tools is telling you something true about himself, even if he was wearing a patch that half the country had been taught to fear, even if she still did not know how he knew about her father, even if Saturday was in every measurable way a leap into something she could not fully see. She had survived 14 months by paying attention to what was real and what was noise. Right now, in the quiet of the empty garage, with the lights still on and the smell of oil and rubber and metal around her like a familiar language, what felt real was this. Something had changed on Thursday night, and she had made it change. That was enough to go on. Saturday came the way hard days always come, too fast and too slow at the same time. Emily was up at 5:15, not because her alarm went off, because she had not really been asleep. She had been lying in the dark, doing what mechanics do when they cannot stop working, running the problem in her head, turning it over, checking each component, looking for the thing that did not add up. The thing that did not add up was simple. She did not know enough. She knew Silas Crowe's name. She knew his age, roughly mid-70s, she guessed maybe older. She knew he had been Hell's Angels for 42 years, which meant he had been patched in his early 30s, which meant there was an entire life before the patch that she knew nothing about. She knew he rode a 1978 shovelhead that someone had maintained with genuine devotion. She knew he had snap-on tools from the same year and kept them like they were sacred objects. She knew he had stood in her parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon and told her she was the real thing. She knew he had known about her father without being told. That last part was the one she kept coming back to. Not with fear exactly, with the particular alertness of someone who understands that information means something, that a man does not carry knowledge about a dead mechanic's daughter by accident. She made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table with the mug between both hands, not drinking it yet, just holding it. Outside, the dark was starting to thin at the edges. She could hear the sound of the occasional car on Route 12 early risers, shift workers, the quiet commerce of a small town starting its day without ceremony. She pulled on her work jeans, her oldest boots, the ones with the scuff on the left toe where a drop crankshaft had nearly broken 2 of her metatarsals 3 years ago, her gray Henley. She braided her hair in the kitchen without a mirror, the way she had done it every morning since she was 12. She packed her tool bag. Not the whole rollaway that would have been presumptuous, like showing up to someone's house for dinner and bringing your own table, but a serious selection. Her most used combination wrenches, both metric and SAE. Her best ratchets. Her diagnostic scanner, a snap-on Zeus, the one thing she had spent real money on, the one tool she would have carried out of a burning building before almost anything else. Screwdrivers, pliers, the small LED work light she clipped to her collar, her compression tester, her timing light. She looked at the bag when she was done packing it. The bag was heavier than she usually carried. Good. Let them see she was serious before she said a single word. She drove to the address in the early morning dark. It was farther out of town than she expected. Route 9 going north, then a county road she had driven past 100 times without ever thinking about what was at the end of it, then a gravel turnoff marked with nothing but a reflective post that had been put there by someone who knew they were already there. The building was large, metal-sided, no windows on the exterior walls. 2 bay doors facing the parking area, both closed. Several motorcycles parked outside, not in a line, not in any organized row, just parked the way bikes get parked when the people who own them are not performing anything for anyone. A black GMC pickup, a dented white cargo van. Security lights on the corners of the building already unnecessary in the growing light. She sat in her truck for 30 seconds. Then she got out, picked up her tool bag, and walked to the side door. She did not knock. She had thought about it during the drive, whether to knock or just go in, whether politeness or confidence was the right opening move, and she had decided that a mechanic arriving at a shop at 7 in the morning does not knock. You knock on someone's door. You walk into a workplace. She walked in. The inside was bigger than the outside had prepared her for. 3 bays each with a full-size lift. A long workbench along the entire left wall, tool organization that was slightly less precise than hers, but more than adequate. Parts shelves in the back, a rolling parts washer, an alignment machine that looked newer than the building around it. Good lighting, not the sad fluorescent flicker of a half-maintained shop, but the kind of lighting someone had actually thought about, bright and even, and without dead spots. And the motorcycles. She counted 7 in various stages of work. A pre-war Indian, 2 knuckleheads, a panhead that looked like it had been ridden hard and survived things that should have destroyed it. A newer Softail with a custom frame modification that she could see immediately was going to require a very specific kind of patience to get right. An early Sportster that had been partially disassembled with unusual precision. And in the far bay on the nicest lift, a machine she did not immediately recognize, not because it was obscure, but because what had been done to it was extensive enough that she needed a second look. She took the second look. She was still taking it when the voice came from behind her. "You're either Emily Carter or we've got a serious security problem." She turned. The man was somewhere in his late 40s, built solid with close-cropped, gray hair, and a face that had been through weather not beaten but shaped. Like stone that has been in a river long enough to lose its rough edges without losing its mass. He was holding a coffee mug in one hand and looking at her with an expression of careful, professional neutrality. "Emily Carter," she said. "Silas told me 7 o'clock. "Silas tells people things," the man said. "Doesn't always warn the rest of us." He paused, not hostile, measuring. "Jake Dawson, I manage operations here." He looked at her tool bag. "What did you bring?" "Combination wrenches, metric and SAE. Ratchets. Snap-on Zeus scanner, compression tester, timing light, the basics." Jake Dawson looked at the bag, then at her, then at the bag again. "Zeus scanner," he said. "Yes. Those run about $8,000. 8.4 when I bought it. A beat. You paid $8,000 for a diagnostic scanner. My father would have too if he'd had the money when they came out." She held his gaze. "I prioritize tools." Jake Dawson drank some coffee. He did not smile. She got the impression he was a man who came to smiling carefully and after consideration, but something shifted slightly in his face. Something that was not quite approval, but was in the same postal district. "All right," he said. "Come on, I'll introduce you." There were 4 other men in the shop that morning. Jake introduced them in the efficient, low-ceremony way of a former soldier, which is what he was. Emily would learn that later. Army 2 tours and expertise in logistics that had translated from coordinating supply chains in combat to coordinating parts and customers and schedules in a motorcycle shop with surprising directness. Victor Hayes was the oldest of the crew, late 60s, with hands that were permanently curved from 40 years of gripping wrenches in a manner of speaking that consisted largely of declarative statements with no unnecessary words attached to them. He looked at Emily for a long moment when Jake introduced her and then said, "You know shovelheads, just that no preamble? I've rebuilt 2, she said, both from cases up." Victor Hayes nodded once, turned back to the panhead he was working on. The other 3 were younger Cody, who was maybe 30, and moved fast and laughed at things before they were finished being funny. Marcus, quiet and systematic, who Emily would later learn could identify an engine problem by sound alone with an accuracy that bordered on the unsettling. And a man everyone called Deke, whose real name she did not learn for 3 weeks, and who on that first morning looked at her and said, "Silas really sent a girl." "Silas really did," Emily said. "What do you know about bikes?" "More than you probably, but I'm happy to find out." Deke stared at her. Cody laughed before it was finished being funny, as was apparently his custom. Marcus kept his eyes on the Sportster he was disassembling and said quietly without looking up, "Just let her work, Deke." A pause. "She brought a Zeus scanner." Deke looked at the tool bag, then back at Emily. All right, he said, with the particular tone of a man who has not changed his opinion, but has agreed to gather more data. We'll see. Silas was not there that first morning. He arrived at 9:30, the shovelhead, announcing him before he was visible, and when he came through the side door, he did not make any speech or introduction. He looked at Emily where she was working. She had by then been assigned to the partially disassembled Sportster alongside Marcus and had already identified what Marcus already knew and was in the process of confirming with her scanner, and he nodded, as if something he expected had occurred. Morning, he said. Morning, she said. He poured a coffee and went to look at the machine in the far bay, the one she had been watching since she arrived, the one she still had not fully sorted. She kept working, but she kept one eye on Silas because she had not forgotten the thing she did not know about yet, and because she believed, as she had believed about engines her whole life, that if you are patient enough, the system will tell you what it is. The first 3 Saturdays passed in that pattern. She came in at 7, she worked. The men tested her in the way that men in a shop test any newcomer. Not with obvious challenges, but with the particular selection of tasks. They give you the problems they bring to you versus the ones they handle themselves, the degree to which they move aside when you are working versus the degree to which they hover. She passed the tests without acknowledging that they were tests. She diagnosed a chronic hesitation issue on the pre-war Indian that 3 of them had tried to locate for 6 weeks. It was a vapor lock problem, made worse by a slightly undersized carb jet. Simple when you knew where to look, invisible when you did not. And she said nothing dramatic about having found it. She just fixed it, wrote up a note on the job card, and moved to the next task. She correctly identified that the frame modification on the Softail was going to cause stress fractures at the rake joint within 18 months if not corrected, and she drew it out on the whiteboard in the back. Stress vectors, load distribution, the math behind why the current geometry was going to fail, without being asked and without making it a production number. Victor Hayes stood behind her while she was drawing and did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, "Your father teach you that?" "My father taught me to look at how things carry load," she said, still drawing. He said, "Every machine has a logic, and if something's going to break, it'll break where the logic runs out." Victor Hayes was quiet. "Tommy Carter," he said. She turned. "You knew my father." "Knew of him." Victor set down the wrench he was holding. "Silas knew him better. Tom Carter did work for us maybe 15 years back. Good work, honest pricing. Man never tried to take a dollar he hadn't earned." Emily put down the marker. "What kind of work?" she said. "Engine work mostly. Things we needed done that we didn't have the equipment for at the time. Couple of custom builds." Victor paused. He never talked about having a daughter who worked on bikes. "I wasn't working on bikes when I was 9, she said. "I was working on bikes by 12. He might have mentioned it after." "Maybe." Victor picked his wrench back up. "He was a private man." "Yes," she said. "He was." She went home that evening and sat with the ledgers again and ran the numbers again, and the number at the bottom of the column had not changed in the way she needed it to change. The pay from the Saturday work was good, better than good, genuinely good, the kind of rate that acknowledged skill rather than just time. But she was one person in one set of hours, and the debt was patient in a way she was not. She kept coming back. The 6th Saturday was the one that changed everything. She arrived at 7 as usual. The shop was already occupied, all 5 of them present, which was unusual. Victor and Marcus were standing together in front of the far bay, the one with the machine she had never been assigned to, looking at it with the specific body language of men standing in front of a problem that has beaten them. She set down her tool bag. "What's happening?" she said. Jake answered. "Silas's bike, not this one, another one, the one in there." He nodded toward the far bay. "It's a 1965 FLH, full restoration, 18 months of work. Engine was rebuilt from scratch by Victor. Everything was right." A pause. "Until yesterday." "What happened yesterday?" "Started it for the first time since the rebuild. Ran for 40 seconds. Then Jake made a sound that translated directly to something catastrophic and sudden. Dropped every cylinder. Won't start now. We've been at it since 6 this morning." Emily walked to the far bay. Now she looked at it properly. The 1965 FLH was in restoration terms a museum piece. Every component had been addressed. The paint was extraordinary, a deep, specific red that she recognized as a period-correct color, done with the kind of patience that cannot be rushed. The chrome was impeccable. The leather was new but correctly styled for the year. The engine of Panhead the last year before the Shovelhead took over a piece of history in itself had been rebuilt with a precision that Victor Hayes had clearly brought all of his 40 years to. She did not touch it yet. She walked around it once, looked at every surface, looked at the engine from multiple angles, looked at the carburetor, looked at the ignition. Then she said, "What did it sound like when it dropped?" Marcus answered. He was the sound one. Even drop. All cylinders at once. No misfire sequence, no progressive degradation. Just, he snapped his fingers. Gone. All at once, she said, all at once. She was quiet for a moment. "Did anyone check the timing after the rebuild?" Victor said from the other side of the bike. "I set the timing. I've been setting timing on Panhead since before this girl was born." She did not react to the edge in his voice. She said, "I'm not questioning the set. I'm asking if anyone checked whether it could move." A beat. "What do you mean move?" Marcus said. "The advance mechanism," she said. "On the 65, the automatic advance is mechanical. The weights pivot on pins. If one of the advance springs is slightly underspec, not wrong, just slightly light, the mechanism can oscillate at idle speed. It'll set correctly when you set it run fine for 30 or 40 seconds while the engine's warming, and then as the oil pressure stabilizes and the engine load changes, the advance can overrun. You'd lose all your timing at once, every cylinder simultaneously, which is why it ran for 40 seconds. Complete silence. She looked up. All five of them were looking at her. Victor Hayes' face had gone through several things. She watched it go through them. Resistance first, then the mechanical mind working despite the resistance, then the working mind reaching the same place she was pointing toward. Then something else, a thing that was harder to categorize that had something in it of a man being shown a door he had been standing next to without seeing. "Show me," he said. She pulled her tool bag over, took out her advanced timing tool. Yes, she had one because she had worked on old Harleys, and you do not work on old Harleys without one, and began methodically checking the advance mechanism. She narrated as she worked, not to explain herself, but because in a diagnostic situation, saying what you are seeing out loud creates accountability and allows other people to spot the thing you might be missing. She found the spring in 4 minutes. It was not dramatically wrong. It was not broken or obviously damaged. It was, as she had said, slightly under spec. Not enough to fail inspection, not enough to flag on a visual check, not enough to show up as wrong until the machine was under dynamic operating conditions and the physics of the situation made it matter. "There," she said. Victor crouched beside her. He looked at the spring. He looked at it for a long time without speaking. Then he said quietly in a voice that contained something he was clearly not in the habit of expressing, "Well, just that." "I can have a correct spring in from our supplier by Monday," Marcus said, already typing on his phone. "I can probably pull a matching spring from my stock at the shop," Emily said. "I have a set of advanced springs for early panheads that I bought with a parts lot 2 years ago. I can check tonight." She looked at Victor Hayes. "I don't want you to feel like I stepped on your workbench," she said. "This was one spring. Everything else in there is some of the best rebuilding I've ever seen." Victor Hayes looked at her. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "Girl, I've been a mechanic for 47 years, and I've been wrong maybe 8 times. He paused. This was one of them. He stood up, picked up his coffee. "Don't apologize for being right." She turned to find Silas standing in the shop doorway. She had not heard him arrive. He was watching her with an expression she had seen before, the one he'd had in the parking lot of the gas station, revision and recognition combined, except that it was deeper now, as if what had been a first impression was becoming a conclusion. "You found it," he said. "It was the advanced spring," she said. "I heard." He walked toward the bike, stood beside it, put one hand on the tank, not a casual touch, but a deliberate one, the way you touch something that has meaning. "This was Tommy's design," he said. "The color, the tank badge placement, the way the front forks are set. He sketched it out for me 10 years before I could afford to build it. Called it my retirement bike." A pause. "I never told him. He died before I could thank him for it." Emily's throat tightened. She had gotten very good in 14 months at managing the moments when grief tried to arrive without warning. She had a system. She acknowledged the feeling, gave it 1 second, no more, and then moved to the next task. She gave it 1 second. He would have liked that you're building it, she said. Silas looked at her. He would have liked that you're fixing it. The room was quiet. Then Cody said from somewhere in the back, I'm going to get more coffee. Is that okay with everyone? Or do you need me to feel emotional for another minute first? And the room broke and everyone laughed and the moment passed and the shop went back to being a shop. But something had happened. Something had settled into place the way a correctly torqued fastener settles, not dramatically, not with any sound, but permanently. The kind of settled that holds. That was the day Victor Hayes began teaching her. Not officially, not with any announcement or formal acknowledgement. Just the next time she was working on something in his area of the shop, he stopped beside her and said, You're holding the flux core at too steep an angle for that joint. And she had straightened it, and he had nodded and moved on. And the time after that, he had stopped and said, I'll show you something about knucklehead head gaskets that you won't find in any manual. And she had put down what she was doing and gone with him. He was teaching her, and she was teaching him the Zeus scanner, the specific capabilities of modern diagnostics on vintage machinery, the way that data could confirm what intuition suggested, and neither of them said anything about it being reciprocal because neither of them needed to. She started coming in on Thursdays as well, then Tuesdays. Then there were weeks when she was at the club shop more than she was at Carter's repair, and she had to work back-to-back nights to keep her own customer commitments, and she survived on truck stop coffee and the specific sustaining energy of doing work that mattered. Jake noticed. He said nothing for 2 weeks. Then he sat down across from her at the workbench one afternoon when the others had gone for lunch and said directly the way he said everything, You're running yourself thin. I'm fine, she said. You're not sleeping enough, and you're carrying a shop debt that's eating you alive. He said this without cruelty, just information. Silas knows about the bank situation. She put down the carburetor she was cleaning. How does Silas know about my bank situation? Silas makes it his business to know things about the people he brings in. Jake met her eyes. He's not going to let you fail Emily, but he's also not going to hand you anything. That's not how he operates. I'm not looking for a handout. I know you're not. That's what I'm telling you. Jake leaned back on his stool. Just let things develop. Don't try to solve everything yourself in the next 30 days. Some things take time. She sat with that. He knew my father, she said. Not a question. Yeah. My father worked for him. For the club, about 15 years ago. Engine work, couples of custom builds. My father never told me. Jake was quiet. Tommy Carter was careful about compartments, he said. He didn't bring his work home. Didn't bring the club home either, I'd guess. He was protecting his family, not hiding something. She knew that was true. She knew it because it was exactly what her father would have done, and because the knowledge of it, that he had been protecting her even from the things he cared about, made her chest hurt, in the specific way it hurt when she loved someone and missed them at the same time. Okay, she said. She picked up the carburetor. She cleaned it in silence for a while. Then she said without looking up, If Silas wants to talk about whatever he's building up to, I'm ready to hear it. Jake said he'll get there. The thing Silas was building toward came 3 weeks later on a Tuesday evening in November, when the temperature had dropped enough that even the heated shop felt the outside cold in the bones of its metal walls. He sat down beside her at the workbench. He had never done that before. Always stood, always maintained the slight distance of a man who was used to being set apart, and he put a folder on the bench between them. She looked at the folder. Open it, he said. Inside were documents. Business documents. She could read them well enough to understand the general shape, though the legal language was dense. A property assessment for Carter's repair, a financial summary, and a proposal. She read the proposal. She read it twice. Then she set it down and looked at him. You want to be a silent partner in my garage, she said. I want to help you restructure the debt. Keep the property in your name, your family's name. I'm not interested in owning anything. He paused. I had someone look at your books. You're 3 months from serious trouble. I know you know that. I know that, she said. I also know you're the best young mechanic I've worked with in 30 years. I knew it when your father was turning wrenches for me, and I suspected it might carry through. I know it for certain now. He let that sit for a moment. The garage should survive. It would be a waste if it didn't. Why, she said. Why does it matter to you? He was quiet for a moment. A real quiet, not stalling, not performing, but the quiet of a man choosing the right words with the care that the right words deserved. I spent a lot of years, he said, doing things the hard way because I thought that was the only way that meant something. Asking for help felt like losing ground. He looked at his hands on the table. I let a good man go under once. Could have done something and didn't because I had principles about staying in my lane. He paused. Lost a lot of sleep over it. Still do. She understood, without asking, that the good man he was talking about was not her father. That was a different story, one she might hear someday or might not. This isn't charity, she said. No, it's investment. In a mechanic I believe in, and in something your father built that deserves to keep standing. He picked up the folder, held it out to her. You have 2 weeks to decide. No pressure in either direction. She took the folder. She held it in her hands and felt the weight of it, not the paper weight, but the other kind. I have one condition, she said. He looked at her. Tell me everything about your history with my father. Everything he did for the club, every conversation you remember. I want to know that part of him. She held his gaze. He didn't tell me, so I'm asking you. Silas Crow looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Fair, he said. That's more than fair. He stood to go. She said, Silas, he stopped. The advanced spring I pulled from my stock, she said. I checked it against spec. It's correct. He looked at her. Good, he said. He walked out. She sat at the workbench for a while after he left. The shop was quiet, the others had gone home, and the machines sat under the lights with the particular stillness that engines have when no one is running them like held breath. She opened the folder again. Read the proposal again, ran the numbers in her head because the numbers were her language, the same way an engine's rhythm was her language. And she did not need paper to work them when she had been doing them in her head for 14 months. It was a good deal. It was a very good deal. Not generous to the point of charity exactly as he had said, but structured with enough care and precision that she knew someone had spent real time thinking about how to make it work without diminishing her. That mattered. She put the folder in her tool bag, zipped it closed. Tomorrow morning, she would open Carter's Repair at 7. She would change oil bleed brakes, run diagnostics, write invoices. She would manage the number at the bottom of the column. But tonight, sitting in the borrowed warmth of this shop, surrounded by machines that carried decades of human history in their steel and chrome, she let herself feel something she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time. Not relief, not hope exactly. Something more specific. The feeling of being seen accurately. Of being understood not as a category or a demographic or a liability risk, but as precisely what she was. A mechanic, her father's daughter. The real thing. And underneath all of that, underneath the folder in the bag, and the numbers in her head, and the spring that had fit, and the advanced mechanism that was finally going to work correctly underneath all of it, was something she could feel but not yet fully see. Something in the way Silas had sat down beside her. Something in the folder's weight. Something in the way Jake had said, let things develop. The sense, faint but real, like the first knock of an engine developing a problem that hasn't become catastrophic yet, that the world she was looking at right now was not the whole picture. That there was something behind it she had not been shown yet. And that whatever it was coming. She said yes to Silas on a Friday morning, 9 days after he handed her the folder. Not because she had run out of reasons to say no. She had plenty of reasons to say no, a lifetime of learning to depend on nobody, 14 months of proving she could carry it alone, the deep, almost structural resistance to accepting help that had been built into her by circumstance and pride in equal measure. The reasons were all still there. She had looked at every one of them. She said yes because her father had built something that deserved to survive. And because she had finally, after 9 days of sitting with it, in the quiet of the shop, and the loud of her own head, separated the act of accepting help from the idea of being weak. They were not the same thing. She had confused them for a long time. She was done confusing them. She called Silas at 7:15 in the morning. He picked up on the second ring. Yes, she said, a pause, short. Okay, he said, I'll have the paperwork drawn up by Monday. Silas? Yeah. You said you'd tell me about my father. I did say that. I'm ready to hear it. Another pause longer this time, the kind that has weight behind it. Come by the shop Sunday. Not the workshop, my place. I'll make dinner. A beat. I cook better than you'd think. She almost smiled. I'll be there at 6. She hung up and stood in her own garage for a moment with the phone in her hand and the early morning quiet around her, and the particular feeling of a decision that cannot be undone settling into the body like temperature. Not dramatic, not sudden, just present, permanent, and real. Then she opened the bay doors and went to work. Monday came with the paperwork and a lawyer Silas trusted, in a process that was cleaner and more straightforward than she had expected. She had brought her own copy of the business financials, sobritos. The lawyer, a woman in her 50s named Patricia Holt, who wore reading glasses on a chain and had the manner of someone who has seen every possible configuration of human bad decision-making and is no longer impressed by any of it, looked at Emily's documents and then looked at the proposal and then looked at Emily and said, "This is structured well for you." Just that, as a statement of fact. "I know," Emily said. Patricia Holt almost smiled. The papers were signed on Wednesday. Thursday morning, Emily opened Carter's Repair. With the debt restructured and the immediate pressure removed in a partnership she still did not completely understand the full shape of, and she felt not relief, not yet, but the absence of a weight she had carried so long, she had forgotten it had a specific location in her chest. It was the Sunday dinner at Silas's where she learned about her father. Silas lived simply. She had not known what to expect and had probably imagined something that matched the mythology, something compound-like, fortified, deliberately imposing. What she found was a house that a man had lived in alone for a long time and had not bothered to perform for anyone. Comfortable furniture that had been sat in enough to take the shape of its owner. A kitchen that showed signs of genuine cooking. Books on a shelf, real ones, well-read ones, a set of Cormac McCarthy novels and a history of the Korean War, and 3 books on motorcycle metallurgy, and a worn copy of something by Steinbeck, whose spine had been broken so many times it barely held. He made chili. It was excellent. He told her about her father over 2 hours and 2 cups of coffee that followed the meal, sitting at the kitchen table with the outside dark coming down and the inside warm, in the way that rooms are warm when the people in them are finally saying the things they should have said years ago. Tommy Carter had started doing work for the club 15 years back, when Silas had still been running a far more active operation and the club had needed a mechanic they could trust absolutely. Someone with skill, with discretion, and with the particular kind of integrity that does not bend under pressure. "A lot of people told me they were trustworthy," Silas said. "Your father was just actually trustworthy. You can tell the difference when you've been lied to enough." Tommy had built 2 engines for the club that became in their small world legendary. He had done 6 other jobs over 4 years, all of them clean, all of them perfect, all of them priced so fairly that Silas had twice tried to pay him more than the invoice, and Tommy had twice refused. "He told me," Silas said, looking at his coffee cup, "that he didn't want to complicate what was between us, that he was a mechanic doing honest work and he wanted to be paid honest wages and not anything else. That if he started taking more than he earned, he'd lose the part of himself he'd built the business on." A pause. "I respected that more than I can tell you." Emily sat with that for a moment. "He never told me about you," she said. "No, he wouldn't have. He was protecting the wall between his work life and his home life. That was his right." Silas looked at her. "He talked about you, though. More than you'd guess for a private man. He talked about you like a man who cannot help himself." Her throat moved. "What did he say?" "He said you could hear an engine misfire in a running vehicle from 30 feet away at age 11. He said you argued with him about timing specifications using engineering principles when you were 14, and you were right and he was wrong, and he had gone home and looked it up and lay awake for an hour processing the fact that his teenage daughter had just out-argued him on his own specialty." Silas paused. "He said it was the proudest he had ever been of anyone." She pressed her lips together, looked at the table. "He never told me that," she said quietly. "No," Silas said. "He wouldn't have. He was a man who showed love by staying up worrying and not by saying the words." He looked at her steadily. "You know that already." "I know it," she said. "Then you already knew everything important he told me. You were just hearing it from the wrong direction." She was quiet for a moment. Then she looked up. Thank you, she said, for telling me. He would have eventually said, he just ran out of time. They sat with that for a moment, not uncomfortably, but with the particular weight of true things that cannot be made lighter by being said differently. Then Emily set her coffee down and said, Jake told me you lost sleep over letting a good man go under, that it wasn't my father. She looked at him directly. Who was it? Silas was still for a long moment. Someone I should have stood beside and didn't. His voice was flat. A mechanic like your father. A man who trusted me. Had a situation I could have resolved, and I stayed back because I thought it wasn't my place. Thought it would look like interference. He paused. He lost everything. His shop, his family's house. 2 years later, he was gone, not dead, just gone the way a man goes, when the thing that held him together gets taken away. He set his cup down. I have thought about what I didn't do for that man almost every day for 11 years. Emily said nothing. She could feel what he was not saying, that she was a second chance at something he had failed once. That this partnership was not purely practical. That it was personal in the way that only old regret can make a thing personal. She did not say any of that out loud. She did not need to. He already knew she understood. Okay, she said. He nodded. Okay. She drove home and lay in the dark and thought about her father saying she was the proudest he had ever been of anyone, and she gave it more than 1 second this time. She let it stay for a while. Let it mean what it meant. She was still thinking about it when her phone rang at 6:45 the next morning. It was Jake. His voice was wrong, not panicked because Jake Dawson did not panic, but compressed in a way that meant something serious. Emily, I need you at the shop, now. What happened? Just come. Silas will explain. She was there in 22 minutes. The shop felt different when she walked in. The energy was compressed, tightened the way a room feels when everyone in it is holding something back. All 5 of them were there. Jake, Victor, Marcus, Cody, Deke, standing in the main bay in a configuration that was not casual. Silas was at the workbench, and on the bench was a document she could see from across the room was official and was bad. What is that? She said, walking towards it. Certified letter, Silas said. Received yesterday. He slid it toward her. Read it. She read it. It took her 90 seconds. When she finished, she read the key section again, slowly making sure she had understood it correctly. She set it down. Richard Vaughn, she said. You know the name, Jake said. I know the name. She looked up. He tried to buy my garage 8 months ago. 6 months before that, he bought the auto parts distributor on the north side of Route 12. 2 months after that, he bought the strip mall that includes the hardware store. She paused. He's been acquiring properties along the Route 12 corridor for at least 2 years. The room was silent. He's claiming the property your shop sits on has a title defect, she said to Silas. From a deed recorded in 1987. He's saying the original survey was inaccurate and that a portion of this property, specifically the main building footprint, encroaches on what he's claiming is an access easement. Can he do that? Cody said. He can file the claim, Emily said. Whether he can win it is a different question. She looked at Silas. This is not a real legal concern. This is a pressure tactic. He files something like this, you spend money on lawyers, you spend time on lawyers. The uncertainty clouds any plans you have. You either sell to make it go away, or you spend the next 18 months in a legal fight while he keeps buying up the surrounding land. Silas looked at her. You sound like you've seen this before. I've seen the shape of it, she said. When he approached me about Carter's repair, he sent a letter first. Not a legal threat, just a very friendly letter about what a great investment property it would make. When I didn't respond, he had a contractor come by and spend 40 minutes measuring the property line with equipment pointed at my front lot. I went outside and told him if he wasn't there for vehicle repairs, he needed to leave. She paused. He left, but I started paying attention. How much attention? Jake said. She hesitated. This was the moment. She could feel it, the hinge point in the conversation where what she said next either opened something or kept it closed. She said, I need to tell you all something I should probably have said sooner. Everyone went still. After the contractor showed up, I started keeping track of Vaughn's acquisitions. Public records, deed transfers, business registration, filings, property assessments. It's all public. You just have to look. She paused. I've been looking for 8 months. Jake said very carefully, and she crossed to her tool bag. Not her work bag, the bag she had brought today, specifically because of the call this morning, the bag she had been building for 8 months without being sure why. The same way you replace a part that isn't broken yet because something in the system is telling you it's going to be. She pulled out a manila folder. Fat with paper, she set it on the bench next to the certified letter. He owns 14 properties along this corridor now, she said, all acquired in the last 30 months. He's paid full market value in almost every case, which means money is not his constraint. He's not bottom feeding. He has a plan and the money to execute it. She opened the folder to the first page. There's a commercial development filing with the county from 9 months ago. Mixed-use retail parking a service road that would connect Route 12 to the Old 9 Junction. The filing lists a development company called Blue Ridge Corridor, LLC. She looked up. Blue Ridge Corridor, LLC was registered in Delaware 8 days before the first property acquisition on this stretch. The registered agent is a law firm in Charlotte. The beneficial owner of the LLC is not listed in the public filing. But you found him, Silas said. It was not a question. The Charlotte law firm represents 3 other LLCs. 2 of them are associated with development projects in Tennessee and Western Virginia. Both projects had their initial land acquisition period tied to a holding company that when you trace the corporate chain far enough comes back to a person. One person. She tapped the folder. Richard Vaughn. The room was quiet. Then Victor said slowly, "How long did this take you?" 8 months, she said, evenings mostly, after the shop closed. "You did this," Deke said, and there was nothing dismissive in his voice now. Nothing of the man who had said she really sent a girl, while running a garage alone, working here 3 days a week and restructuring a business debt. "I had a lot of evenings," she said. Nobody laughed. It was not that kind of moment. Jake picked up the folder, began going through it methodically the way he did everything, page by page. His face showed nothing, but she could see his eyes moving, the way someone's eyes move when they are recalibrating something significant. "This is thorough," he said. "It's not complete," she said. "I can't see inside the LLC structure past a certain point without either legal process or someone with access I don't have. But the pattern is clear enough. He wants the corridor. We're in the middle of it." She looked at Silas. "Carter's Repair is on the south end of what would be his access road. Your shop is 3 parcels north. If he has both of us, he has a continuous line." Silas had not moved or spoken since she put the folder on the table. He was looking at it the way he looked at engines. The way she had come to understand was his version of running the problem, working through it methodically in a mind that was both older and more careful than it appeared. "He came after you first," Silas said. 6 months before the letter to you. "Yes. And you kept this to yourself. I didn't know it connected to you until the certified letter gave me the piece I was missing." She paused. "I would have told you sooner if I'd seen the line clearly. I'm telling you now." A long silence. Then Silas said, "All right," not angry, not relieved, just processing. Moving to the next step the way a person moves to the next step when they have decided that reaction is a luxury they cannot afford. "What do we need?" "A real estate attorney," she said. "One who knows quiet title actions and easement law. The 1987 deed claim is weak. I looked at the original survey online last night. It's part of the public record and the boundary description is clear. He's banking on the process being expensive enough to matter more than the merits." "I know an attorney," Silas said. "We also need somebody who can get deeper into the LLC structure than I can." She looked at him. "I don't know who you know, but if there's anyone who can access corporate records that aren't publicly filed, this is the time." Silas looked at Jake. Jake said nothing, but something passed between them, a shorthand she didn't have the full vocabulary for yet, and Silas nodded. "Leave that part to us," Jake said to Emily. "One more thing," she said. She reached back into the bag. She pulled out a second thinner folder. 6 months ago, a mechanic named Roy Hester lost his shop on Route 9. He'd been there for 19 years. He told the local paper he had been served with a zoning complaint about his lift installation, said it had been fine for 12 years, and then suddenly it wasn't. The complaint was filed by a property management company. She opened the folder. That property management company is a subsidiary of Blue Ridge Corridor, LLC. The silence this time was different, harder. Vaughn put a man out of business, Marcus said. Roy Hester's shop is now an empty lot, Emily said. Vaughn acquired it 4 months later for assessed value. She paused. Roy Hester is 61 years old and he's working at an auto parts counter. She looked around the room at Victor Hayes, who had been a mechanic for 47 years and whose hands had built things that belonged in museums. At Marcus, who could hear problems in engines the way other people hear music. At Cody and Deke and Jake. At Silas. This is not just about us, she said. He's been doing this to working people up and down this corridor for 2 years. He uses legal process as a weapon because he knows most people can't afford to fight back. Her voice was steady. It was the voice she used when she was certain, not loud, not performed, just clear. I think we can fight back, but I need to know everyone is with me before I take the next step. Nobody moved. Then Victor Hayes set down the wrench he had been holding. Tell us the next step, he said. She took a breath. I need 2 things, she said. First, access to the original deed records for this property and Carter's repair, both going back at least to 1985. I need to build a clean title history that forecloses his claim before it goes anywhere. She looked at Silas. Second, I need to contact Roy Hester because I think he has documentation from the zoning complaint process that could establish a pattern of conduct. If Vaughn has done this before and there's a record of it, that changes what kind of legal fight this is. Jake was writing on a notepad. Roy Hester, he said. Route 9, you have contact information. He's in the book, she said. Cody said, this feels like we're building a case. We are building a case, Emily said. Are we going to be enough? Deke said. Not challenging, genuinely asking in the voice of a man who has been in situations before where enough was a real question. Emily thought about the third bank loan officer. She thought about someone in your situation. She thought about 14 months of numbers at the bottom of a column and advanced springs that were almost right but not quite, and advanced mechanisms that ran for 40 seconds before physics caught up with them. I've been working with not enough for a while, she said. I've gotten pretty good at finding the thing everyone else missed. Nobody said anything, but something moved in the room, something collective, a shift in temperature, the way a group of people settles into a decision that they have been individually making and are now making together. Then Silas said something she would think about for a long time afterward. Anyone can fight with anger, he said. Real strength is knowing what is worth protecting. She looked at him. My father used to say something like that, she said. I know, Silas said. He said it to me once, about a job he'd done that someone was giving him trouble about. Said he wasn't going to be moved by loud because he knew what he was protecting. He paused. He knew exactly what he was protecting. She nodded, and then she started to work. The next 3 weeks were the most intense of her life, and her life had not been short on intensity. She ran Carter's repair during the day, drove to the club shop for the hours she had committed to, and spent her evenings, and often a significant portion of her nights, building what she had started calling privately the file. Roy Hester was, as it turned out, waiting for someone to call. She reached him on a Tuesday evening and explained who she was and why she was calling, and before she had finished the sentence, he had started talking, not frantically, but with the controlled, careful precision of a man who has been organizing something in his head for 6 months and has been waiting for a reason to say it out loud. He had kept everything, every letter, every complaint filing, every response he had sent, every communication with the zoning board. He had kept it the way mechanics keep things systematically labeled with a clear organizational logic that meant she could find anything in the files he sent her within 2 minutes of receiving them. I knew it wasn't right, he told her on the phone, his voice steady but with something underneath it that was the sound of a man who had been betrayed by a system he had trusted. 12 years my lifts were fine. Same lifts, same installation, same shop. Then I get a complaint from a company I've never heard of, saying my hydraulic lines violate a municipal code that was updated 4 years ago, and nobody said a word about it for 4 years, and suddenly it's a formal proceeding, and I'm facing a $30,000 retrofit or closure. He paused. I couldn't fight it and keep the doors open at the same time. I tried for 4 months. Then I had to make a choice. I know that choice, Emily said. The lot sold 3 days after I closed. I didn't even advertise it. Someone from a property management company called me on the Monday after I shut down. He was quiet for a moment. I should have seen it coming. It felt wrong from the beginning. I just didn't have the ground to stand on to call it what it was. You have the ground now, Emily said. If you're willing to stand on it again. A long pause. What does that look like? He said. It looks like your files plus mine plus a pattern that a lawyer can make into something actionable. She paused. It looks like you didn't fail Roy. You got targeted. And there's a difference. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, who's behind you on this? She told him. Not everything, not the details that were not hers to share, but enough. He said, Hell's Angels. Yes, another pause. I don't have any trouble with that, Roy Hester said. And she almost smiled because it was exactly what she had said to Silas 6 weeks earlier, word for word. And because there was something in the fact that Roy Hester, a 61-year-old mechanic working a parts counter, said it with the same unperformed simplicity. Good, she said. Send me everything you have. The package arrived on Thursday. 47 pages of documentation. She read it that night beginning to end, and when she finished, she sat very still for a moment. Then she called Jake. There's a third property, she said when he picked up. Before Roy Hester. 2 years ago, a man named Gerald Watts ran a small transmission shop on the east side of Route 12. He closed after a tax assessment dispute. I think the assessment was triggered by a filing from one of Vaughn's entities. She paused. I need to find Gerald Watts. It's midnight, Emily, Jake said. I know. I'm not asking you to find him tonight. A beat. But I'm telling you what this is. He's done this at least 3 times. Roy Hester was not the beginning. He was the middle. Her voice was completely flat, not angry past angry into the territory of cold certainty. We are not just defending ourselves. We are the end of a pattern, and we have the evidence to prove it. Jake was quiet. Get some sleep, he said. I'll tell Silas in the morning. She sat with the 47 pages in front of her and thought about Roy Hester at a parts counter and Gerald Watts wherever he was now, and the men at the gas station who had watched and not moved, and the loan officer who had said someone in your situation, and the number at the bottom of the column, and her father in his chair with his coffee cup and his glasses slightly crooked. She thought about the 1965 FLH with the advanced spring that was not quite right, how it had run beautifully for 40 seconds, looked perfect from every angle that did not go deep enough until the dynamic conditions of actual operation made the flaw impossible to ignore. Richard Vaughn had been running on a flaw in the assumption that the people he targeted could not afford to look deeply enough to find it. He was wrong about that, duh. She gathered the pages, organized them, added them to the file that was now 40 pages thicker than it had been this morning. Then she did something she had not done since the night her father died. She picked up her phone and she called the one person she had been meaning to call for weeks and had kept not calling because calling meant saying out loud what she had been carrying. She called her father's oldest friend, Dale Mosier, the farmer with the hay baler, the man who had known Tommy Carter for 30 years. He picked up on the third ring sleep in his voice, but not complaint. Emily, he was immediately alert. You okay? I'm okay, she said. I needed to tell someone who knew him. She stopped, steadied herself. I think I know what I'm supposed to be doing, Dale. With the shop. With all of it. I think I finally see the shape of it. He was quiet. That's something your father used to say, he said, when something clicked for him on an engine. He'd say, I can see the shape of it now. She put her hand flat on the stack of documents. I've got a fight in front of me. She said, a real one, and I don't know exactly how it ends. Dale Mosier said very simply in the voice of a man who has farmed through bad harvests and good ones and has learned the difference between problems and the end of the world. Tommy built you for exactly this, Emily. He just didn't tell you. She did not say anything. She sat with it. I know, she said finally. Then go get some sleep, Dale said, and go be what he built you to be. She went to bed at 1 a.m. She lay in the dark and thought about her father's hands and his ledgers in the advanced spring, in Silas's face when he said, I can see the shape of it, in the certified letter, in Roy Hester's voice on the phone, in a field of evidence that was almost enough. Not yet, but close. And in the morning, she was going to close the distance. Because she was her father's daughter, and she was the real thing, and she had been paying attention for a very long time. And the thing you learn when you have been paying attention long enough is that the systems that are about to fail always tell you exactly how before they go. You just have to be willing to hear what they're saying. She was listening. She had always been listening. She found Gerald Watts on a Friday, not through any connection, not through any resource that Silas or Jake had provided. She found him the same way she found everything, by paying attention to details that most people walk past without seeing. His name had appeared once in the county property transfer records she had been combing through, listed as the grantor on a deed transfer dated 22 months ago. The property address matched the transmission shop she had identified. The grantee was a shell company she now recognized as one of Vaughn's acquisition vehicles. She cross-referenced the name against the county business license registry. Gerald Watts had held a business license for Watts Transmission and Auto Service for 17 years. The license had lapsed 22 months ago, not renewed, just allowed to expire, the way licenses expire when the business they belong to no longer exists. She searched the white pages. One Gerald Watts in the county on a rural route number that put him about 14 miles from where his shop used to be. She drove out on a Saturday morning unannounced, because she had learned that unannounced was sometimes the only way to get to people who had been burned enough to stop picking up unknown calls. He came to the door in work clothes, not shop clothes, but the clothes of a man who had found other ways to keep his hands occupied. He was somewhere in his mid-60s, compact and quiet-faced, with the specific stillness of someone who has processed something painful all the way through to the other side and arrived at a place that was not bitterness, but was not quite peace either. He looked at her. "You're not selling anything," he said. Not a question. "No, sir," she said. "My name is Emily Carter. I run Carter's Repair on Route 12. I think you and I have a mutual problem named Richard Vaughn." He was quiet for a moment, then he stepped back from the door. "Come in," he said. Gerald Watts had not kept his documents the way Roy Hester had. He had not kept them at all. Or so he told her for the first 10 minutes of their conversation, in the flat, tired voice of a man who had done his grieving and was past the point of expecting rescue. "I threw most of it away," he said, "after the sale went through. Didn't see the point of keeping paperwork for something that was gone." Emily did not let her face show what she felt about that. "What do you remember?" she said. "Walk me through what happened in order as specifically as you can." He did. He was a precise man. 17 years of running a transmission shop will do that to you, will train you to track sequences carefully, because transmission work is entirely about sequences, and if you lose your place, you have to start over. And his account was detailed, even without documentation to back it. The assessment dispute had started with a county tax office notification. His property assessment had been revised upward by 31% based on what the notice called updated comparable sales data. He had contested it because the comparables they cited were commercial properties with road frontage, and his shop sat back from the road on a lot that had always assessed lower for exactly that reason. The contest had taken 7 months. During that period, his property tax bill, based on the disputed assessment, had been generating penalties he was not paying because the amount was in dispute. When the contest was finally resolved, he won on the comparables argument. But the penalties that had accumulated during the contest period were assessed against the settled rate, not the disputed one, and the settlement of those penalties, which he had not known to budget for, came due at a time when his shop was already operating on thin margins. The timing was the thing, he said. If the contest had resolved 6 months earlier or 6 months later, I could have managed it. It resolved at exactly the wrong moment. Emily was writing on a notepad. She had not brought a recorder. She had not wanted to make this feel like a deposition. "Who filed the original revaluation request?" she said. He looked at her. "I don't know. I didn't know you could find that out." "You can," she said. "It's a public record request to the county assessor's office. Takes about a week to get the response." She looked up from her notepad. "I'm going to file one on Monday. If the revaluation was requested by a third party rather than initiated internally by the assessor's office, the name of the requesting party is in the record." Gerald Watts was very still. "You think it was him," he said. "I think it fits the pattern," she said. "Roy Hester got a zoning complaint. You got a tax assessment revision. Both timed to create financial pressure at a moment when it would be hardest to absorb. Both followed by a property acquisition from one of his entities shortly after the business closed." She set her pen down. It's the same play run two different ways. He looked at her for a long moment. What are you going to do with this? He said. I'm going to take it to a lawyer who's already building a case around the title claim he filed against a property I'm associated with. I'm going to add your situation and Roy Hester's situation to create a documented pattern of conduct. She paused. And I'm going to ask you if you're willing to be part of that. Not as a main party, you don't have to put yourself in the center of this if you don't want to, but as a witness to a pattern, someone who can say under oath if it comes to that this is not one incident, it's a method. Gerald Watts looked at his hands. I'm 64 years old, he said. I worked that shop for 17 years. My father taught me transmission work in his garage when I was 12 years old. He paused. I sold the property for assessed value, which means I got a fair price on paper. What I didn't get was the 17 years I put into the reputation of that place. You can't price that. He looked up at her. If I can help make sure he doesn't do it to someone else, I want to do that. Thank you, she said. She drove back to town and called Jake from the truck, talking through the window because reception was better that way. 3 cases, she said. Gerald Watts is the first, Roy Hester second, us third. He's been refining the method each time. With Gerald, it was a tax instrument. With Roy, it was a zoning complaint. With us, he went directly to a title claim. She paused at a traffic light. He's getting more aggressive because the earlier plays worked. He's confident. Confident people make mistakes, Jake said. Yes, they do, she said. I'm counting on it. The lawyer was Patricia Holt, the same one who had handled the partnership paperwork. Emily had suspected from that first meeting that Patricia Holt was a more formidable person than her chain-reading glasses presentation suggested, and she had been right. When Emily laid out the full file in her office on Monday afternoon, all of it, Gerald Watts and Roy Hester, in the LLC chain, in the property records, in the public record request she had already filed with the county assessor, Patricia Holt sat across the desk and read every page in complete silence. When she finished, she took off her glasses and looked at Emily. How long did this take you? She said. 8 months to build, 3 weeks to connect it. Patricia Holt put her glasses back on. The title claim is a nuisance action, she said. The 1987 survey is unambiguous, and his easement theory is creative but not supportable. We can get that dismissed probably within 60 days. She tapped the Roy Hester file. The zoning complaint is more interesting. If the original complaint was filed by a party with a financial interest in the outcome, which appears to be the case, that's potentially tortious interference. We'd need Roy Hester to be willing to be a plaintiff. He's willing, Emily said. And the tax assessment on Mr. Watts's property, if the public records request confirms a third-party filing, that's potentially actionable as well, depending on what we find in the assessor's records. She looked at Emily over her glasses. You understand this is not a simple lawsuit. This is potentially multiple causes of action in multiple jurisdictions. It will take time and it will take resources. I understand that, Emily said. Do you have the resources? Emily thought about the partnership agreement, about Silas's folder on the bench, about what she had said yes to and why. I have people behind me who believe this is worth doing, she said. That's going to have to be good enough for now. Patricia Holt looked at her steadily. All right, she said. I'll take this on. A pause. One thing I want to be clear about. The strength of what you've built here is the pattern. The pattern is what makes this more than a property dispute. The pattern is what turns 3 separate incidents into a course of conduct. She leaned forward slightly, which means the most important thing we can do right now is preserve and document everything, every piece of paper, every public record, every communication before Vaughn realizes someone is looking. Emily said, how do we know he doesn't already realize? A pause. We don't, Patricia said. Emily went back to the shop that evening. All of them were there. It was becoming the shape of these weeks. The whole group present, more often than not, the shop functioning as something it had probably always functioned as underneath the work surface, a place where people who trusted each other came to figure out what to do next. She laid out what Patricia had said. Jake listened with his arms crossed and his face showing nothing. Victor listened with a wrench in his hand that he was not using, just holding. Marcus sat on the workbench. Cody and Deke stood near the back. Silas stood slightly apart from the group the way he usually did, Not removed from it, but positioned to see all of it at once, the way a man who has been responsible for people for a long time positions himself. When she finished, nobody spoke for a moment. Then Deke said, "So what happens if he figures out we're building the case before we're ready?" "He'll move," Emily said. "He'll either accelerate the title claim, try to create legal pressure faster than we can respond, or he'll find another angle. Something new. Something we haven't anticipated." "Can he do that?" Cody said. "He has money and he has lawyers," she said. "Yes, he can do that." "Then we need to move faster than he does," Marcus said. "That's exactly what we need to do." Silas spoke then, quietly without drama in the voice he used when he had been thinking about something long enough to be certain of it. "Emily," he said, "the public records request you filed with the assessor's office. How long until the response?" "I filed Monday. Statute says 10 business days. So 2 weeks from Monday." "That's our clock," he said. 2 weeks. She nodded. "There's one more thing," she said. She had been saving this, not because she was unsure about sharing it, but because she needed to be in the right room with the right people when she said it. "I've been tracking Vaughn's development filing with the county, the mixed-use project, Blue Ridge Corridor." She looked around the room. "He has a county planning commission meeting in 18 days. It's a public hearing on the preliminary development approval. If the approval goes through at that meeting, the project moves to the next phase. If we're going to make the pattern public and create the kind of record that matters, that meeting is the place to do it." Jake said, "A public hearing?" "Yes. Any citizen can submit written comment on a development application. Any citizen can speak. It's on the record." She paused. "If we can get Roy Hester and Gerald Watts to that meeting, if we can present the pattern in a public forum where it becomes part of the official record, it's harder to make disappear than a lawsuit that settles quietly." The room was very still. Then Victor Hayes said in his flat declarative way, "We all go." "Victor," Jake started. "We all go," Victor repeated. He was not looking at Jake. He was looking at Emily. "You're not doing this alone. None of us do things alone. That's the point." He set the wrench down on the bench with a sound that was somehow final. "We go. All of us." Emily looked at Silas. Silas was watching her with that expression. The revision and recognition one, the one she had first seen in a gas station parking lot, which had been deepening steadily over these weeks into something she still did not have a precise word for, but that felt in the chest like being claimed, like being chosen. Not romantically, something older and less complicated than that. The way a master claims an apprentice or the way a family claims a member they have been missing without knowing it. "What do you need from us?" he said. She thought about it. "I need Victor and Marcus to help me go through the property records for both parcels and build the cleanest possible title history. I need Jake to coordinate with Patricia on the legal structure. I need Cody to find Gerald Watts a ride to that planning meeting because he told me his truck doesn't start reliably in cold weather." She paused. "And I need Deke to do something he is probably not going to like." Deke looked at her. "I need you to call the local paper," she said. "The Planning Commission hearing is a public meeting. That means it can be covered. If a reporter knows what's coming, they can be there. And a reporter being there means there's a record that doesn't depend entirely on us." Deke stared at her. "You want me to call a reporter?" he said. "I want someone to call a reporter," she said carefully. "You're the most persuasive person in this room." Cody made a sound. "Don't," Deke said to him. Then to Emily, "Why am I the most persuasive?" "Because you're the most skeptical," she said. "And skeptical people, when they finally believe something, sound more convincing than people who believed it from the start. A reporter's going to hear from a Hells Angels mechanic who spent weeks not being sure about this and is now certain. That's a more credible source than somebody who was always on board." A long pause. Deke looked at Jake. Jake shrugged, the shrug of a man who thinks this is probably right and is not going to say so directly. "Fine," Deke said. "I'll call the damn reporter." The next 14 days were the fastest of Emily's life, and also somehow the longest. She worked her shop during the day, worked the club shop in the afternoons, and spent her nights on the case with a focus that she recognized at a certain point as the same state her father used to enter when he had a problem. He was close to solving a state where everything outside the problem became slightly blurry, and the problem itself became hyper-clear, every detail vivid and important and connected. The public records response from the county assessor's office came on the 11th day, one day ahead of the statutory deadline, which Emily took as either good luck or efficiency and was grateful for either way. She opened the envelope standing at the mailbox at Carter's Repair on a cold afternoon with the wind coming in from the north, the way it had been on the night at the gas station, and she read the response, and then she stood very still for a moment. The revaluation request on Gerald Watts's property had been filed by a third party. The filing party was identified in the public record as Blue Ridge Property Consultants E.A.L. Sons. She already knew that Blue Ridge Property Consultants was a Vaughn entity. She had identified it 4 weeks earlier. She called Patricia Holt. "I have it," she said when Patricia picked up. The assessor response, Blue Ridge Property Consultants, a Vaughn entity, filed the revaluation request that started the cascade that drove Gerald Watts out of his shop. Patricia Holt was quiet for a moment. Then she said in the careful, controlled voice of a lawyer who is feeling something but has trained herself not to lead with it, "That is exactly what we needed. It connects the tax instrument to the same source as the zoning complaint and the title claim," Emily said. 3 different legal tools, 3 different targets, one beneficial, owner pulling the strings through LLC structures he thought were opaque. "They were opaque," Patricia said, "to most people. He didn't count on someone who reads property records the way I read engines," Emily said. A pause. "No," Patricia said, "he clearly did not." 3 days before the Planning Commission meeting, something happened that Emily had not anticipated, which was saying something because she had anticipated a great deal. She was at the club's shop late afternoon working alone in the far bay on the 1965 FLH, which now had the correct advanced spring installed and had been started twice and had run beautifully, both times the engine's voice exactly what it should have been, which was the sound of something that had been built right, finally doing what it was designed to do. She heard a vehicle pull into the lot. Not a motorcycle, a car, a good car she could tell by the engine. Note something European, well-maintained, driven by someone who was used to being in a hurry. She came out of the bay. The man standing as the parking lot was someone she had never seen before, but she knew who he was. Not from photographs. She had not been able to find a clear photograph of him in any of her research, which she now understood had been deliberate. She knew him because of the way he stood, the way a man stands when he is accustomed to spaces rearranging themselves around his arrival. He was in his 50s, well-dressed, not ostentatiously, fit in the maintained way of someone who exercises because it is part of managing his presentation. He had the eyes of someone who calculates and the smile of someone who has learned that the calculation goes better when covered with warmth. "Emily Carter," he said, not a question. Her heart rate did not change. She had learned a long time ago from her father from the gas station parking lot from 14 months of running a business alone that the moment your heart rate changes is the moment you lose the high ground. "That's right," she said. "Richard Vaughn," he said. He did not offer a hand. He was watching her the way she watched an engine she was about to diagnose, trying to see what it was before it told him. "I thought it was time we met face to face." "You drove out here personally," she said. "That's interesting. I find that personal conversations are more productive than correspondence." He looked at the shop building, took a moment deliberately to look at it. "Nice facility. I understand you have been doing some work here." "That's right. Good work from what I hear." He brought his attention back to her. "I'll be direct, Ms. Carter. I know you've been looking into my business activities. I know you've been speaking to certain former property owners in the area. I know you've filed a public records request with the county assessor." He paused. "I'm a thorough person. I stay informed." Her face showed nothing. "Then you know," she said, "that I found what I was looking for." Something moved behind his eyes. Not fear, not yet, but the first sign of a man recalculating. "What do you think you found," he said carefully, "is a series of unrelated business transactions conducted by separate legal entities engaged in lawful commercial activity. What I found," she said, "is a documented pattern of using legal instruments as economic weapons against small business owners who lack the resources to fight back. 3 separate targets, 3 separate methods, 1 beneficial owner." She held his gaze. "I have the assessor's records on Gerald Watts. I have the zoning complaint filing on Roy Hester. I have your title claim on this property. I have the corporate chain connecting them all." She paused 1 second. "And I have a lawyer who knows what to do with it." Vaughn looked at her, The calculation behind his eyes was running, and she could almost see it, the rapid assessment of what she had just told him against what he thought she knew, the measurement of risk, the consideration of options. That's a serious set of allegations, he said, for a young mechanic. That's a strange response for a man who's just been told there's documented evidence against him, she said. Usually people who are innocent say they didn't do it, not that the person making the allegation is young. A beat. What do you want? He said. His voice had changed. The warmth was still there in the surface layer, but underneath it now, there was something harder. I don't want anything from you, she said. I want you to stop doing what you've been doing to working people on this corridor. And since I don't have any confidence that asking you will accomplish that, I'm going to make sure the record is complete enough that someone else can enforce it. She paused. I'm also going to the Planning Commission meeting in 3 days. That is your right, he said. I know it is. He looked at her for a long moment, looked at the building again, looked back at her. You're making a mistake, he said. I want you to understand that I'm telling you that as a piece of genuine advice. This kind of fight against the kind of resources I have access to, it rarely ends well for the person who started it. Emily said very quietly, is that a threat? It's an observation, he said. Here's my observation, she said. You came here personally because something I'm doing worried you enough to make a personal visit. You didn't send a lawyer. You didn't send a letter. You came yourself, which means the lawyers and the letters haven't given you what you needed, which means you thought a face-to-face conversation might change something. She looked at him. It hasn't. I hope you have a safe drive back. He stood very still for a moment. Then he walked to his car. She watched him go, watched until the car was out of the lot and on the road and gone. Then she went inside and called Jake. He was just here, she said. Vaughn, in person. A beat of silence. What did he say? Jake said. He told me I was making a mistake. He said it was an observation, not a threat. It was a threat. She was walking back toward the FLH bay as she talked, partly because movement helped her think, and partly because there was something grounding about being near the machine. He knows more than I thought. He knows about the assessor's records request. He knows I've been talking to Gerald and Roy. He has someone in the county offices, Jake said. Or he's paying attention to public records the way I am. Either way, she stopped. He's scared, Jake. That's why he came. He wanted to see if he could frighten me off in person. A pause. He can't. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Emily. Yeah. When you were standing there talking to him, were you actually not scared, or were you just performing not scared? She thought about it. The real answer, not the easy one. Both, she said, for about the first 30 seconds, then just actually not scared. She paused. He's a man who uses systems. I've been inside the system long enough to see where the load runs out. Once you can see that it's just math. Jake said, Silas needs to know about this. I know, I'll call him. She called Silas. He listened to the full account without interrupting, which was how he always listened completely without filling silence in a way that made you more precise, because you knew the listening was absolute. When she finished, he said, he won't try anything before the meeting, too visible. He needs the planning approval, and he can't afford any action that could be connected to him in the 48 hours before a public hearing. I think so too, she said. But after, Silas said, if the hearing goes against him, he'll look for another angle. I know, she said. We'll need to be ready. What does being ready look like? She thought about it. Patricia filed the tortious interference claim this afternoon, she said, on Roy Hester's behalf. Once that's on record, any action Vaughn takes that can be connected to him becomes part of a pattern in active litigation. That limits him. She paused. And Patricia is filing for a temporary restraining order on the title claim tomorrow morning. That gets us 60 days minimum of protection on this property while the claim is adjudicated. And Carter's repair. She had been waiting for this question, or not waiting. She had known it was coming and had been deciding in the back of her mind how to answer it. I need you to do something for me, she said. The deed for Carter's repair. My father's original deed. I need it recorded with a title insurance policy attached. Patricia says it's the cleanest protection we can create in the available time. She paused. That costs money. I have some. Not quite enough. I'll cover it, Silas said. Immediately, without any pause for calculation. This is the third time you've, Emily. His voice was patient, not the patience of someone running out of it, but the patience of someone who has an infinite amount of this particular kind. Let people help you. You told me 2 months ago you were done confusing that with weakness. She was quiet. I did say that, she said. Then mean it. She let out a breath. Okay, she said. Thank you. Don't thank me, Asti, he said. Just show up on Thursday and be exactly what you are. She almost smiled. What am I? She said. Tommy Carter's daughter, he said, and a mechanic who doesn't leave until the job is done. The Planning Commission meeting was held in the county municipal building on a Thursday evening. The room was set for perhaps 60 people. When Emily arrived at 6:15, 45 minutes early, there were already 30 people there. By the time the meeting started, the room was full. Roy Hester was in the third row. Gerald Watts was beside him. Dale Mosier, who had driven 40 minutes without being asked who had simply called Emily that morning and said, "What time does it start?" was one row behind. The reporter Deke had called a woman named Sandra Cho from the county paper mid-30s with a recorder on the table in front of her, and the particular attentiveness of someone who knows they are in the right room was against the side wall. Jake sat in the back row, arms crossed, watching the door. Victor and Marcus were beside him. Cody was beside them. Deke was at the end of the row, still looking like a man who has agreed to be somewhere without fully reconciling himself to it, which was she had come to understand just how Deke looked. And Silas was in the front row. Not by accident, he had chosen that seat deliberately, and his presence in it, quiet, still carrying 42 years of everything his vest represented, communicated something that did not need to be said in words. Emily was at the table designated for public comment. In front of her was the file, not a performance version, not a condensed summary. The real thing, every document, every record, every connection, organized the way she organized a diagnostic report, which was the same way her father had taught her to document a repair. Start with the symptom, trace to the cause, show your work. Richard Vaughn was across the room with 2 lawyers and an assistant who was managing a laptop. He had looked at her when she came in. She had met his eyes for exactly 1 second and then looked at the commissioners. The chair opened the hearing. Emily stood up when it was her turn. She did not begin with an introduction. She did not set context. She did not ask the commissioners for anything at the start. She began with Gerald Watts's transmission shop, 17 years old, driven under by a tax revaluation filed by a Vaughn entity. She said it cleanly without emotion, with a document reference for every fact. She moved to Roy Hester's shop, 19 years driven under by a zoning complaint filed by a Vaughn entity. Same structure, same method, same result. Documents in hand, reference for every fact. She moved to the title claim against the property associated with the club shop, showing the corporate chain connecting it to the same beneficial owner. And then she stopped talking for a moment. She looked at the commissioners. I'm a mechanic, she said. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a developer, and I have no interest in blocking progress or development in this community. But when I'm working on an engine that's failing, I don't fix the symptom, I find the cause. And the cause of 3 business failures on this corridor over the past 2 years is a single person using legal instruments as economic weapons against people who could not afford to fight back. She paused. 2 of those people are in this room tonight, Gerald Watts and Roy Hester. They worked for a combined 36 years building businesses in this community. They are now gone, and their properties have been acquired by the same entity that is asking this commission for approval to proceed with a development project that requires them. The room was very still. I am asking this commission, she said, to table the approval pending an independent review of the acquisitions that underpin this project. Not to deny it, not tonight, just to pause long enough to look at whether the foundation of this project was built on fair dealing. She picked up the file. I have documented evidence for everything I have just said. I am submitting it into the public record. She sat down. The room stayed still for another full second. Then it wasn't still anymore. The commission chair called for order twice before he got it. The 2 lawyers in Vaughn's row were already conferring. Sandra Cho was writing fast with the focused energy of someone who had just gotten exactly what she had come for. From the third row, Roy Hester was looking at her. She would think about his face later, would think about it many times in the days and weeks that followed, when she needed to remember why the whole thing had been worth doing. He was not crying, he was not dramatic. He was looking at her with the expression of a man who had been carrying something alone for a very long time and had just for the first time had someone else pick up part of the weight. That expression. That was the one she would keep. After the meeting in the parking lot in the cold, Vaughn's lawyers walked to their car without speaking. Vaughn himself stopped near his car and looked across the lot at her. She was standing with Silas and Jake and Roy Hester and Gerald Watts and Dale Mosier and all the rest of them in the cold and the dark with the light of the municipal building behind them. Vaughn looked at all of them. He did not say anything. He got in his car and drove away. Silas stood beside her and watched the car go. "It's not over," she said. "No," he said. "It's not. He'll find another angle." "Probably." She looked at him. "Are you worried?" Silas thought about it. Really thought about it in the careful, unhurried way he approached things that deserved that kind of thought. "No," he said finally, "because I know what he doesn't know." "What's that?" He looked at her. He thought he was dealing with a young mechanic from a small town who didn't have the resources to stand up to him. He paused. He's dealing with Tommy Carter's daughter, and she's been paying attention since she was 9 years old. He looked back at the road where the car had disappeared. He never had a chance. She stood there in the cold for a moment. Then she said, "He might try something against the garage directly before the legal process has time to fully protect it." "He might," Silas said. "If he does, then we deal with it," Jake said from her other side. "Together." She looked at both of them, then at Roy and Gerald and Dale, at Victor and Marcus and Cody and Deke, who was standing at the edge of the group with his hands in his pockets, looking exactly like a man who would never admit that what he was feeling right now was something close to pride. She had come to this parking lot tonight with a file and a set of facts in the particular kind of calm that comes from knowing your work is solid. She was leaving with something she had not expected to find. Not victory, not yet, not completely, not with Vaughn still out there recalculating, but proof, the proof that she had been looking for without knowing she was looking for it in the 14 months since her father's chair had moved and his coffee cup had hit the floor and she had slid out from under a truck and run to him. The proof that you do not have to carry it alone, that there are people who will stand beside you if you let them. That strength is not the absence of need. It is as her father had known, and Silas had learned, and Roy Hester and Gerald Watts had proved by showing up in that room tonight the willingness to be part of something larger than yourself when the moment calls for it. She had stepped forward in a gas station parking lot for a stranger, and the stranger had stepped forward for her. And the people he had gathered around him had stepped forward for her, and she had gathered Roy Hester and Gerald Watts, and they had stepped forward. It spread the way things spread when they are true outward in every direction without anyone directing it, following the same logic that a correctly structured load follows distributed balanced, stronger at every joint than any single member could be alone. She was cold. She was tired. She had not slept more than 5 hours a night for 3 weeks. And she was in the parking lot of the county municipal building on a Thursday night in November, more certain than she had ever been in her life that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Richard Vaughn was not done, but neither was she, not even close. Vaughn made his move 4 days after the planning commission meeting, not against the club shop, not against Roy Hester or Gerald Watts. He had understood after Thursday night that those flanks were covered, that the legal filings and the public record and the reporter's story, which had run in the county paper on Saturday morning under the headline, "Pattern of Pressure, How One Developer Targeted Small Businesses." Along Route 12 corridor had built a wall around those positions that he could not breach cleanly. So he went for the one thing he thought was still exposed: Carter's repair. Emily got the call at 6:50 in the morning on a Monday before she had unlocked the bay doors. It was a number she didn't recognize. She answered anyway because she had been answering unknown numbers for weeks now, in the way that people answer the phone when they know the situation is still unresolved and the next move could come from any direction. The voice on the other end was a man she had never spoken to. He identified himself as a representative of the county building inspection office. He told her in the flat practice tone of someone reading from a script they did not write that Carter's repair had been flagged for an emergency structural inspection based on a third-party complaint alleging that the hydraulic lift installations in Bay 2 and Bay 3 did not meet current load-bearing requirements under the revised commercial building code. The inspection, he told her, was scheduled for Wednesday morning, Pending the outcome, operations involving those lifts would need to be suspended. She stood in the empty shop with the phone in her hand and the morning light coming through the bay doors she had just unlocked, and felt for approximately 4 seconds the specific quality of dread that comes when you have been waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it has just dropped, and it is exactly as heavy as you knew it would be. 4 seconds. Then she said, "Can you tell me the name of the party who filed the complaint?" "That information isn't available at this stage of the process," the man said. "Is the complaint filed as a public record?" A pause, shorter than it should have been. "It will be entered into the public record following the inspection," he said, "but not before." "That is correct." "All right," she said. "Wednesday morning, what time?" 8 o'clock. "I'll be here," she said. "Can I get your name and direct number?" He gave them to her. She wrote them down on the back of a job card from the pile on the workbench. She hung up. She stood there for a moment longer than 4 seconds this time. Then she called Patricia Holt. Patricia picked up on the second ring, which meant she had already been working, which was consistent with everything Emily had observed about her. "He filed a building complaint against my lifts," Emily said. "When did you get the call?" 4 minutes ago. "Inspection scheduled for when?" "Wednesday, 8 a.m. Patricia made a sound, not quite a word, more the sound of a person whose prediction has been confirmed and who takes no satisfaction in being right about something bad. He moved faster than I expected. The planning commission tabling rattled him. A pause. "Emily, here is what I need you to do right now. I need the original installation documentation for both lifts, the permits, the inspection sign-offs when they were installed, the manufacturer specifications. Everything." "I have it," Emily said. "My father filed everything. I organized it when I took over the shop." "Of course he did," Patricia said, and there was something in her voice, a brief human thing that was not quite a smile but was adjacent to one. "Send me copies today. I'm going to file a pre-inspection objection this afternoon, asserting that the complaint lacks the factual basis required for an emergency designation." She paused. "It probably won't stop the inspection, but it creates a record that the process was challenged before it concluded. That matters." "What if the inspector finds something?" Emily said. Not because she believed the lifts were non-compliant. She had maintained them personally, serviced them on schedule, knew their load ratings the way she knew her own hands. She asked it because she had learned in the past several weeks to pressure test her own assumptions before anyone else did. "If the inspector finds something legitimate, we deal with it," Patricia said. "If the inspector finds something convenient, something that materialized between now and Wednesday, in a facility that has operated without incident for years, then we have a different kind of problem and a significantly stronger case." She paused. "Either way, you need someone else in that shop on Wednesday morning. Someone credible. A witness." Emily had already thought of this. "I know who to call," she said. She called Victor Hayes. He picked up on the fourth ring with the unhurried manner of a man who does not feel compelled to answer phones quickly because he has learned over 68 years that very little that arrives by phone is actually urgent. "Building inspector is coming Wednesday morning," she said. "Complain about my lifts. I need someone there who knows what a properly installed hydraulic lift looks like and can testify to it." A beat. "What time?" Victor said. 8. "I'll be there at 7:30, he said, "so I have time to look at them myself first." She almost said thank you. She stopped herself because Victor Hayes did not respond well to gratitude expressed before the work was done. 7:30, she said. "Bring coffee," he said. "Not the truck, stop kind." She called Silas last. Not because he was least important, the opposite. She called him last because she wanted to have all the pieces in place before she reported to him the way she always completed her diagnostic before she told a customer what the problem was. You do not present a partial finding. You present a conclusion you can stand behind. She told him everything. The call, the timeline, Patricia's response, Victor's commitment. Silas listened. When she finished, he said, "He's trying to hurt you because he can't reach the others." "I know. He thinks the shop is your weak point." "It was," she said. 8 months ago, before the partnership, before the debt restructure. It might have worked then." She paused. "It won't work now." "No," Silas said. "It won't." A pause. "Emily." "Yeah. I want to be there Wednesday too." She started to say that wasn't necessary, that she had it covered, that he didn't need to, and then she stopped. She heard her own voice in her head from 2 months ago in the kitchen at his house. You said you were done confusing accepting help with weakness. 7:30, she said. Victor wants real coffee. I'll bring the coffee, Silas said. The inspector arrived at 8:02 on Wednesday morning. He was younger than she expected, late 30s, with the manner of a man who is professionally neutral in the way that people are neutral when they have been told to be neutral and are following instructions rather than expressing a natural state. He came in, introduced himself, looked at his clipboard, and looked at the bays. He saw Emily. He saw Victor Hayes, who was standing beside Bay 2 with his arms crossed in the specific posture of a man who has inspected more equipment than most inspectors have ever seen and is prepared to be unimpressed. He saw Silas, who was standing near the back wall, saying nothing, whose presence in a room had the particular quality of mass, not threatening, not performed, just undeniable. The way a large piece of machinery is undeniable, even when it is not running. The inspector's eyes moved across all three of them. Something in his clipboard arm shifted slightly. He inspected both lifts. He was thorough, she gave him that. Whatever his instructions were, he did the actual work of looking. He checked the mounting, he checked the hydraulic lines, he checked the load ratings against the posted specifications. He checked the service records she had pulled and organized on the workbench in chronological order, every maintenance entry dated and signed going back to her father's tenure. He was at it for 45 minutes. Victor watched every step without speaking, not hovering, just present in the way of someone who has the credibility to evaluate what is being evaluated and wants the inspector to know it. At the end of 45 minutes, the inspector looked at his clipboard. Then he looked at Emily. Both lifts are in compliance, he said. Installations are within specification. Service records are complete and current. He paused. I'll be filing a no deficiency report. She said very calmly, thank you for being thorough. He nodded, he gathered his clipboard. He left. The shop was quiet for a moment after the door closed. Then Victor Hayes uncrossed his arms. Your father serviced those lifts on a 6-month cycle, he said. I checked the dates. Every 6 months, she said, without fail. Victor nodded. He picked up the coffee cup he had set on the corner of the workbench when the inspector arrived and had not touched since. He drank some coffee. Good man, he said. About her father. Yes, she said. He was. Silas pushed off the wall and walked toward her. He stopped a few feet away and looked at her with an expression she recognized immediately, the one she had first seen in a gas station parking lot on an October night that now felt like a different lifetime, except that it was actually the same lifetime, just the part of it that came before she understood what her life was going to be. You all right? He said. I'm better than all right, she said. Good. He looked at the bays, at the lifts, at the organized service records on the workbench. He's out of angles, he said. The legal filings are in place. The public record is established. The Planning Commission tabled his application, and it's not coming back to a vote until the independent review is complete, which Patricia says will take at minimum 4 months. He paused. He can still fight, but he can't win quickly enough to matter. He'll settle, Emily said. Not a hope, a diagnosis. Yes, Silas said. He'll settle. He settled 3 weeks later. Patricia called on a Tuesday afternoon with the word, not a full concession, not the kind of resolution that included an apology or an admission, because men like Vaughn do not do those things, but a withdrawal. The title claim against the club shop property was withdrawn with prejudice, meaning it could not be refiled. The development project application was quietly withdrawn from the Planning Commission docket. Patricia received a communication from Vaughn's lawyers that was in its careful legal language, the equivalent of a man leaving a room without being seen to leave. Roy Hester's tortious interference claim, which was still active, produced a separate settlement 3 months later, one that Patricia described as appropriate and that Roy described on the phone to Emily the evening he signed it as more than I expected and less than I deserved, but enough to matter. Gerald Watts received a call from the county assessor's office informing him that a review of the original revaluation process had identified procedural irregularities and that a correction was being entered into the record. It was not the shop, it was not the 17 years. But it was as Gerald told her when he called proof. And proof, he said, was not nothing. Emily took all of this in over the days and weeks that it arrived the way you take in good news when you have spent a long time managing bad news carefully without letting it feel entirely real. until it was checking it from multiple angles, the way you check a repair before you sign off on it, making sure it held. It held. The Planning Commission meeting story that Sandra Cho had filed was picked up by 2 regional papers and a trade publication for independent automotive businesses. The trade publication ran a longer piece the following month. Emily declined to be photographed, but gave the interview sitting at the workbench in Carter's repair, talking about her father and the lifts and the advanced spring and what it meant to find something that had been built right and make sure it stayed standing. The calls started coming after that, not immediately, not dramatically, the way business builds when it is built on reputation, rather than marketing steadily from unexpected directions, from people who had heard something from someone who had heard something. A vintage motorcycle collector 3 states away, who had a panhead with a problem nobody had been able to diagnose. He called because someone had told him there was a young woman mechanic who had found an advanced spring problem on a 1965 FLH, and that if she could find anything. She found it in 2 hours. It was not the advanced spring. It was a crack in the primary case so fine it was invisible without a specific dye-penetrant test in a very good light. She told him send him the documentation, gave him the repair quote, and told him the truth about the timeline. He drove it to her on a flatbed 2 weeks later and told 3 people about it before he got home. Those 3 people told others, and it spread the way things spread when they are true. By spring, the shop had a waiting list for the first time in its history. Not a long one, 3 weeks, which for a small-town single mechanic operation was significant but not unmanageable. She hired Donnie full-time. He was 18 by then, no longer mostly sweeping, increasingly capable, asking in the right questions in the way that people ask right questions when they have been paying attention to the right things. She caught herself one afternoon explaining to him exactly why an engine makes a particular knocking sound when the timing belt has slipped 3 teeth to the left. She stopped in the middle of the sentence. He was watching her with the focused, patient attention of someone who was listening to everything, not just the words, but the structure behind them, the logic, the way the pieces connected into a whole picture. The same way she had listened to her father. "You're getting it," she said. He nodded slowly, seriously, the way he took most things. "Can I ask something?" "Yeah." "How do you know where to start? Like when something's wrong and you don't know what it is yet. How do you decide where to start looking?" She thought about it. The real answer, not the easy one. "You start with what the system is telling you," she said. "Not what you expect it to tell you, not what you think it should be doing. What it is actually doing. You listen first, then you look, then you touch." She paused. Most people skip the listening part because it's the slowest, but it's the one you can't skip. Donnie nodded. She recognized that nod. She had given that nod herself at a workbench with a flashlight in her hand when she was 9 years old. She turned back to the engine she was working on. Victor Hayes came by the shop on a Saturday morning in April. Not to work, just to come by, which was new. He was on a motorcycle she had not seen before, a clean early Sportster, and he parked it and came in and looked at the shop the way people look at places when they are checking whether their memory of them matches the current reality. He looked at the whiteboard, at the 3 vehicles on the lifts, at Donnie working on the Indian Scout in Bay 2, focused and careful the way he had been taught. "He's good," Victor said. "He's getting there," Emily said. "He listens." Victor turned to look at her. "You taught him that." She didn't say anything. "Your father taught you by showing you what he valued," Victor said. "You're doing the same thing." He was quiet for a moment. "Didn't know if you knew that." She looked at the bench, at her father's sign, still in his lettering, slightly more faded than it had been 14 months ago, but still perfectly legible because good lettering, like good work, takes a long time to fade. "I'm figuring it out," she said. Victor nodded once, the definitive nod. Then he went and looked at what Donnie was doing on the Scout and said, "You're holding the impact driver at too steep an angle for that bolt pitch." And Donnie corrected it, and Victor nodded again, and the Saturday morning went on. The last time she saw Silas that spring, it was a Sunday evening at his house. Not the formal Sunday dinner of months ago, something more ordinary and therefore more significant. She had brought food, he had made coffee. They sat at the kitchen table and talked about the 1965 FLH, which was finished and had been ridden for the first time the previous weekend. "How did she feel?" Emily asked. He was quiet for a moment in the way of a man describing something that matters enough to choose the words for. Like something that was supposed to happen finally happening, he said. She knew exactly what he meant. She did not say so because she did not need to. He looked at her across the table. Your father sketched that bike out for me over 3 conversations, he said. I have the sketches somewhere, his handwriting. He paused. I'd like you to have a copy. Her throat moved. I'd like that too, she said. He nodded. They sat with the coffee and the quiet that had developed between them over these months. Not the quiet of people who do not know each other, but the quiet of people who have been through something real together and have settled into the particular ease of shared experience, shared work, shared stakes. You did something, he said after a while, at that planning commission meeting. You did something I've seen very few people do in a long time. What's that? You stood in a room full of people who were not on your side and you told the truth without performing it. No anger, no drama, just the work. Here is what I found. Here is the evidence. Here is what it means. He looked at his coffee cup. That's the hardest thing there is, Emily. Harder than any fight. To be so sure of what you have that you don't need to make it louder than it is. She thought about her father in his chair with his ledgers and his patient, careful way of working through problems that did not announce their solutions. I learned it from someone, she said. Silas looked at her. So did I, he said, from a different mechanic, a long time ago. He paused. The good ones all teach the same things. They just use different engines. She drove home in the April evening with the windows down because the air had finally turned, had finally lost the last of winter's edge and taken on the first warmth of a season that had not arrived yet, but was close enough to feel. She pulled into the parking lot of Carter's Repair. She sat in the truck for a moment looking at the building, at her father's sign, at the bay doors closed now, the shop quiet and dark and complete. She thought about an October night in a broken gas station light and an old man on the ground and 3 men who assumed she would walk back to her truck. She thought about 10 seconds. 10 seconds of not walking away. 10 seconds of choosing from the entire available range of possible responses the one that required her to be exactly what she was. She thought about what those 10 seconds had opened. Not as a transaction, not I did this and therefore I received that, but as something closer to a key turning in a lock that had always been there waiting for the specific shape of that specific moment. She got out of the truck. She went inside. She turned on the bay lights. She stood in the middle of the shop and looked at the lifts and the toolboxes and the whiteboard and the parts organized along the shelves and the framed photographs she had moved from her father's office to the main wall, Tommy Carter, at this same bench 20 years ago. Wrench in hand, looking at the camera with the distracted half-attention of a man who would rather be working. She had become what he built. Not because he had planned it precisely, not because life had been kind or the path had been clear, but because the thing he had built into her, the listening, the patience, the refusal to accept that something couldn't be understood, if you look carefully enough, that thing had held. Under the weight of the debt and the rejections and the grief and the threat and all the rest of it, that thing had held. And it had been enough, more than enough. She turned off the lights. She locked the bay doors. She drove home through the April dark, and the road was empty, and the night was quiet, and somewhere behind her the sign that said Carter's Repair. Her father's lettering faded and permanent, and hers stood in the dark, the way things stand when they are built right and maintained well and worth protecting, standing as they always had, as they always would.